right, guys, we've got another episode here, Coffee with Coach Patrick. This morning, I'm joined by Rob Pettifer, head coach of the Richmond Rapids. Good morning, Rob. How you doing?
Morning, Pat. Good. Glad to be here.
Good, good. Thanks for coming on and doing this. I imagine you've seen a couple of our recordings that we put up, and you got an idea of what this is all about.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Good, good. So really, we're just going to grab a coffee and grab a chat. So the first thing I want to ask you, your wife, your kids, you, how is everybody in your household doing? How's your family doing? Is everybody doing well? Are you guys staying safe and everything's going all right?
Oh yeah, I mean everybody's good. My wife does work at the hospital. She's a CT tech, so she's in kind of in the thick of it, as it were, regularly, and she does see COVID patients. And so we are conscious of that, and but we haven't. We've been practicing pretty strict social isolation, just because there's a greater chance that Pam and then us will come in contact with it more than other people. So we haven't really left the house much since I think it's the 13th or 14th. My wife goes to work, and I think we've had a total of like 4 or 5 grocery shops. You know, we do big shops as much as we can, and then kind of minimize the amount of time that we're out in the community. But you know, other than that, that's pretty much it. Kids are loving it. They're young, so and they're not in school. Not that that's a big deal to them. They miss their friends, but they're enjoying just being home, playing with each other. There's 3 of them, so they play in the backyard when it's nice. They play with their toys inside the house when it's not, and then. But you know, for the most part, it's kind of like a big vacation for them. It's like summer vacation started early.
Yeah. Well, and there's a couple of questions I have from that now. So like one, I do the same thing. We do the kind of big grocery shops. And I don't know how you guys work normally as a family, but I find for us, it's like, we're used to like stopping by the market and grabbing what we need every day or two, because everything's so close to our place. But now we're going out doing like every other Sunday. So like tomorrow is my next big grocery run. And it just ends up, you feel like weird buying all that food at once, at least for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you guys do? Do you guys do it every 2 weeks or something like that? Or
I would say about every 2 weeks. I mean, there's 5 of us, so we go through the food pretty quick. But we do like a big sort of Costco type run. We'll do that about every 2 weeks, 10 days, sort of thing, depending on what was available and what we forgot, and if there's something we need per se. And then other than that, we'll probably do one other sort of vegetable run. So we'll have enough fresh produce and fruits and veggies in the house to last a week, which with 3 little kids and 2 adults, and that stuff goes quick. And we can't, even though we actually have 2 fridges, one upstairs, one downstairs, you go through it still pretty quickly. So that's kind of our routine on how we're kind of managing it and trying to make sure we found everything. But we haven't really found there's a big shortage of anything now, and everything's kind of in the stores, and you can find most things.
Unless you're looking for baking supplies or yeast.
Yes.
Right? I heard yeast is a critical resource now.
Costco and Langley had it yesterday.
Oh, nice. No, it's funny. I should tell you about this. Leanne found this really amazing Tupperware that goes in the fridge. You buy your like produce and you put in this Tupperware, and it's amazing. It'll keep it great for 2 weeks.
Nice.
Like it keeps the freshness, just the way it's designed. I don't know. I don't know anything about it, but I'll ask her more about it and I'll let you know, because it's been really great at kind of making better use or saving our produce for longer.
Cool.
So I'll let you know about that. The other thing that you made me think of, like the kids must love having you home this much.
Yeah. That's a big life change, I think, for all of us in the profession, is that not only this time of year that we're actually home with our families, which for the most part, this is when we're home the least amount, is in that sort of late March, frankly, and then early to mid-April timeframe. We're on the road, we're at camp, we're at comp, probably at least 2/3 of that month and a half, as it were, for on most years. And so to actually be home is nice, and so it's kind of reconnecting with the kids. I think the biggest fallout, is going to be when we get back to a sense of normalcy. And then, especially my youngest, I think with the older 2, and they'll be 8 and 6 in the summer. My youngest, who's 3, turning 4 this summer, I think he'll have the biggest sort of transitional struggle with it, because he won't quite understand why I'm not home all the time, or why we're not following. Now we have a new routine, and kids are all about routine. So are coaches, frankly. But So that routine is great right now, and they're loving it, and he's loving it especially. But that, and it will change at some point as we kind of transition back into kind of normal life. But I think that'll be our biggest hurdle.
Well,
Hopefully that is, at least.
and how are you liking it? Like, I can speak for myself. Like, I've got a 14-month-old, and she's so curious and adventurous. But that is, I always tell people, that's the silver lining in all this. Like, it's way out of our normal routine. We miss all the things we normally get to do. We miss our athletes. I miss being at the pool desperately. Like, it's killing me. But hanging out with her has just been so much fun for me, because I think about the time I would have missed with staging camp and trials and everything like that. And over that time frame, all the things I got to see and do with her. So it's like, that must be the blessing in disguise, I guess, for you, right?
Yeah, just that one-on-one or one-on-two or one-on-three time, and like for the most part, my wife works nights. So I do the morning routine, get up, breakfast, dishes, and then I start school at around 9 o'clock most mornings. We do either doing workbooks or some of the activities that their teachers have sent out. And so that's sort of my role with the kids, and that's part of my routine with them now. And so, I definitely would normally not do that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then we'll go outside, and I'll either let them play or I'll work on a project or something outside, which is nice again as well, because, I'm getting to do things that have been like, on that home improvement list. And it's like, all right, I'll get around to that eventually when I've got time. Well, I have time now. So I'm starting to tick those little things off that are maybe a little bit labor intensive or time intensive that I would normally have time with. But it's been nice just to do that with them, and they'll help. And so that definitely speeds up the process. So everything goes much faster with a 3, 5, and 7-year-old helping me.
Nothing but efficiency there, right?
Absolutely. There's a lot of
funny. I joke around with people all the time. Like, I live in this tiny condo with a baby and a dog and my wife, and it's just like, we're always on top of each other. But we have to get out and go for these walks. So if it's nice outside, we try to take Parker and the dog out for a walk twice a day for a short walk, just because otherwise she goes nuts. Yeah. And what I've noticed is that it's the most pristine landscaping work being done in everyone's yard. So anybody who has a house right now, like, the yards are going to look immaculate.
Yes, right? Absolutely. Yeah, this is, like I said, I spent like 3 hours pressure washing parts of my backyard that I've been putting off for a while. I was like, oh, that's what color it's supposed to be. You're getting these little things done. You're like, oh, this looks great. Why didn't I do this earlier? And it's like, oh, it's just like a lack of time.
Yep.
And while we're all still sort of busy working in some capacity, it's not the same amount of sort of time that we have to we're not actually at work. We're not commuting to work in my case, where I have a long commute every single day to every single workout. So, it just, you're finding time in the day I wouldn't normally have. So it's enjoyable in that respect. Just for myself, just like, there's a certain that sense of satisfaction from actually getting a job done and completing a task. And so I can't do that at work as much right now, outside of a bunch of administrative things and sort of paperwork for the government. But getting this stuff done outside, or just finding time to do little hobby things that I think we as coaches, sometimes we forget about doing things for ourselves. So playing out my wood shop out back and making little doodads and stuff like that. Just playing around with my tools is kind of a nice little treat for myself when and if I can get time to do that.
It's funny. One of the things that I started doing is something. I have all these books that I bought, non-swimming books, right? Just to sit down. So when I put Parker down at night, I go and I take an hour and I sit on the balcony. I just read. Yeah. And I haven't had time to do that, because normally I would put her down and then, okay, it's back to workout writing and different stuff. But trying to take that little bit of time just to do something a bit different. So I want to ask you, because I've been thinking about this, and I gave it some thought. I mentioned to a few people, I think by the time we were 3 weeks or 2 weeks into this, it was the longest I'd gone in my adult life without being on a pool deck. Right. Oh, yeah. And I know it has to be the case for almost any coach now by this point, right? Because I think we're 7 weeks into this.
Oh, absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you, I'm curious, like, what's your background? Like, how did you get started in swimming? Like, how old are you? I know you've got, is it just one sister? Do you have other siblings? I know you have a sister.
I got 2. I'm the oldest. I've got a younger brother and a younger sister. My sister's a coach for the Rapids as well. And then we got a brother in between us, and who's a pilot for WestJet.
Okay. So did you guys all swim growing up? Like, were you guys a swimming family? Because you got 2 that work in the sport. So
Yeah, I know we were absolutely a swimming family, but we got into it not because my mom kind of grew up on the middle of nowhere, Manitoba, Saskatchewan border on a farm. So she, no sort of like organized sports in the sense of what we would think of it now, sort of background. And same thing for my dad, who grew up in Kingston, but not really a sporting background when he was out there back in the day. Um, no, we got into competitive swimming because my brother couldn't float. So we were all doing Red Cross lessons. And so, we're all just kind of going through and getting our colors at that point, which is obviously dating myself. They don't do that anymore.
I got my colors too, man. We're there. We're the same.
And so, I think it got to the point where my brother had failed one color. I think it was for 2 or 3 times. I think at least 3 times, because I'm sure my mom wouldn't have bothered doing something different if it was only twice. And upon asking the instructor, she's like, "Well, why does he keep failing?" He's like, "Well, he can't float." And my brother's just not a floater. He's one of those who can't float. He wasn't like unathletic. He wasn't not coachable. But he's just one of those sinkers. He's a little dense in that respect. And so he just couldn't float. So my mom said, screw it. And Mark just probably about 20 steps to the left and went and talked to the local swim coach and signed all 3 of us up because, well, she got 3 kids and got to put them in the same place at the same time just for sanity's sake. And that's really how we got started, not because my mom wanted to put us in any sort of organized sports. I think I was doing soccer at the time. But just because my brother was failing Red Cross lessons, and that kind of, moved us through into the competitive swimming world.
That's awesome. So if your brother could float, you might never have gotten into competitive swimming.
Nope.
And full disclosure,
I can almost guarantee no.
I have to say, like, if your brother could float, we might never have met. And I would not have one of my best friends. So thank you to your brother for not being able to float when he was a little kid.
He never figured it out. Right?
No, he didn't.
I think even at the time when he finished swimming, he was a reasonable level, like a junior national level at the time. So it was no slouch, but he still couldn't float.
Oh, that makes swimming hard when you can't float.
I would think so. As well.
So you swam all the way through, and you swam through university as well, right?
No,
you didn't. Okay.
No, absolutely not.
Tell me the story, man. I want to hear the story then. So you swam all through high school.
Yep, it did the usual sort of high school thing.
And then you went off to university, but you didn't swim. So where did you go to school, and tell us why you didn't swim?
No, I didn't know what I wanted. That was that kind of dumb high school kid where I was like, I don't really know what I want to do. I didn't put a ton of, honestly, and I do regret it now, but I didn't put a lot of effort into my my schoolwork during high school. It's like I was exhausted all the time. I was a bigger kid, and I was kind of constantly growing and doing the usual sort of training program that we did back then, which is a lot. And so I was just constantly tired and fatigued, and I was a good trainer. At least I think it was back then. And so I would, I'd put stuff off, or I wouldn't, work super hard to kind of get really good grades. And I did reasonably well in high school, but, not quite university level sort of entrance grades by the time I finished high school. And I had always planned to take a gap year, but like a half year, do the last semester of high school because I knew Olympic trials were in '96 at that point when they were going to be. I was like, well, I don't really want to change coaches going in. I don't want to go away, or I don't really know what I want to do, because I had looked into the States, and so that was an option that I was actually looking into, and then ended up. So I was, I was like, I want to swim well Olympic trials, give it a good go, and that sort of thing. Because I was I was an okay swimmer at that point. And so I took a year off, not a year, but I took like 1 or 2 courses to finish up my grade 12, and mostly just focused on training. I went to a training camp I think it was a Christmas training camp or a winter training camp. I went down to Cuba, and because they'd held Pan Am's, I think 2 or 3 years prior. So, but it didn't go terribly well. And I ended up, I was, again, pretty motivated, and I was the only one from my club. My coach couldn't go. Richmond was a very small team at that point, so club couldn't afford to send my coach. So I was with, I think the SFU coach, and I think the HIAC coach at the time, and And so I was training hard, but the conditions were awful. Like the first pool we were going to, it looked like a post-apocalyptic war zone sort of set. Like that was the main pool. This is the Pan Am pool. It was just like a Mad Max sort of thing. Like they had closed the doors, locked the doors, and then the whole surrounding area was just like a no-go zone, or people were breaking in, and there was no heat in the pool, no anything. It was just like detritus was everywhere, windows are broken, stuff's on the ground, bricks. You could see where there's ceiling stuff had fallen onto the deck and stuff like that. So we didn't end up training there. They found us this, I guess whoever was organizing it, the coaches, they found us this other outdoor facility. We took a bus there, and so it was like an extra 10 minutes to get there. But it was another outdoor pool, but it was only an outdoor pool because the roof had literally fallen into the pool. And so we've got this brick perimeter of the building, and you can see all the beams up top, but you can see the tiles for the ceiling around the bottom of the pool. But they had heat. They started heating it that they've got there. So if you can imagine heating a size of a 50-meter pool and how long that's going to take. So it wasn't terribly warm. Anyways, so not great training conditions. The food, I was definitely a bit of a wasn't the most well-rounded eater at that point in my life. Not a lot of exposure to things outside of my mother's kitchen. So, but the food wasn't great. We kept finding little wriggly things in some of the food, so it was less than appealing to kind of get my fill. So I probably wasn't eating enough, and then I ended up passing out with hypothermia by the last day. And so I ended up having to take a lot of time off after that from swimming, and then figure out what I wanted to do. And obviously, Olympic trials did not go terribly well after that. And so I decided I wasn't ready to give up on swimming. So I went up to UBC and went up and trained up at UBC with Tom and Randy, who were up there, and just swam for probably 6 months. Then I started going to college because I wanted to, kind of get my act together, and so I started kind of doing what I needed to do to get myself into university. But and after swimming for I think I swam for another 2 years after that, while I was going to college and trying to figure out what I really want to do. And eventually that kind of came to the end of my career. I was like, well, I'm ready to kind of hang it up. And it was at that point where I was like, well, you know what? I got accepted to UBC, and then I went to school after I basically finished my swimming career. I decided to go back, and I got myself into university after that. So took a kind of a roundabout route, and I do think it would have been a lot of fun. And so I did spend a lot of time with the varsity team because that's who I trained with, but I wasn't actually on the varsity team with it. When I was up there, I never swam and had that full varsity experience.
We have that similarity, man, because I think I took the roundabout way as well. I wasn't the best or the most focused high school student, so I kind of did the same thing. So then when you went to school, and what did you study? Like, what did you get your degree in?
I took mostly psychology courses. I found that really interesting when I went to Kwantlen, and then I transferred up and continued with that through the arts program when I was up at UBC. And I found all that stuff really interesting. Not only the abnormal psych, the clinical psych, and just all those sort of courses on how the mind works and how the brain works and how people work and the different sides of people and how things are processed. I always found that really interesting. And so that's kind of the direction I kind of went with.
Were you coaching at the time when you were taking psych? Like, when did you get on pool deck?
Let's see. I got on the. Here's a good story. Let's see. I was done swimming, and no, I started psych before I was on the pool deck. Okay. So it was just something I just was interested in doing, and I only actually I think, like a lot of swimmers who are done swimming and kind of lost or not sure what they want to do, I became a lifeguard because it makes sense. Simple transition and a reasonably well-paying job at the time, and so I actually got into coaching because I think I was carding for about a year and a half, and this is while I'm going to school. I think I was still at Kwantlen at the time. And one of the other guards who was there and asked me, oh, you used to swim, didn't you? I was like, yeah, I used to be a competitive swimmer. He's like, hey, you want to do some coaching? He's the head coach of one of the local summer clubs.
Okay.
I was like, sure. So, and his brother was one of the higher ups in the pool, and so he got me the hookup to help me with my schedule. So I would guard in the morning and coach in the afternoon, and so I had two jobs, and I got a lot of job satisfaction out of doing that, and working with kids, and they weren't great kids, but just teaching kids to swim and kind of giving back a little bit. And by the end of the second year of doing that, of doing kind of summer and lifeguarding, I decided that I was kind of sick of pulling unathletic people out of the catch pool, the water slide, when it was about 2.5 feet deep, and it just had to stand up. That I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to give this coaching thing a go. So, and that's how I kind of like made my way over and kind of applied for my first kind of assistant-y sort of coach position with Winter Club.
So I got a few questions. So the same thing for me. I was going to school and I kind of took the roundabout way into university, and I finally decided I wanted to make coaching my career. And the reason I was fascinated by the psychology thing is that, so while I was going and starting my coaching career, I left university, but I was still doing some night classes.
Yeah.
So I took this developmental psychology course that I was taking while I was coaching full time. Yeah. Well, full time. Coaching plus 4 other jobs to call it my full-time job, that type of thing. And what I found really neat, and this is what I wanted to ask you, is how much of your psychology applied to your coaching at first or even throughout time? Because my prop is really cool for that course, and he let me write a paper. He gave us like a list of 10 different topics you could write about. And I said, or you could present one. So I presented one of writing one about the athletes I coach, and because it's about the age group and everything fit. And he said, that's fantastic. And I still to this day is the best mark I've ever received on a paper because I got to write about coaching swimming.
Yeah. I mean, just they're motivated and you're engaged. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised the work was really good.
Yeah. So, but I found that so much was relevant that was so easy to talk about. So I'm curious, being a psych background guy who got into coaching, because a lot of our peers, there's not a lot of coaches who come from a psych background. It seems like a lot more come from physiology or biomechanics or something right off the board, right? I talked to Mark and he's got an architecture degree, and there's all kinds of different stuff, but yours is really relevant to dealing with kids and also the evolving change in just generations, right? Because we've been doing this long enough. We've seen different groups of kids with different social and psychological elements. So just how much of that kind of applied and helped you in the transition to coaching?
For kind of that overarching understanding of how the brain works and how people process things, and the understanding of being flexible and understanding that your perceptions are not their perceptions, are not their parents' perceptions, and their life experiences and how they're processing all of those, whether that comes from a sport background or not a sport background, and the value they place on all of these things, and understanding self-identity and how it evolves over time with kids and how they see themselves. And when they're young, and especially if they're successful, they identify as a swimmer. And so their swimming becomes who they are. It defines them, for lack of a better term. And then as they grow, that definition of who they are changes and it grows. And swimming is generally still a part of it, but is not the entirety of it. Or you can identify as like a kid or an athlete who swimming is everything about how they identify to themselves, which is not a healthy approach. And you can kind of step in a little bit and try to, push them in a direction to, see themselves outside of, 2-lane ropes and a black line on the bottom of the pool, and teaching kids to understand it's about how you are. It's about how you treat others. It's about how you're perceived by other people. That's who you are, not what a time is, or not, outside of a few, really impressive, world-class performances, people aren't going to remember every race you had, but you're going to remember how you treated them. They're going to remember how hard you worked. They're going to remember, those moments rather than a performance or a ribbon or a medal or something like that. They'll remember how tough you were on a set or at the end of a race when they knew you were tired and had a big event load. Those character moments, right? And that's, how you kind of steer kids in that direction to value that and understand that, rather than, like I said, just that number on the board when it flashes.
Do you notice like that you spoke to something that I've kind of really, that's something I deal with a lot, and it's, you hear this from swimmers all the time. It's like, well, it's a swimmer. That's who I am. And we have to like educate them. Like it's what you do. It's not who you are. And it's like, once you can, I've always found like once you can get them to identify their self-worth and who they are and confidence in themselves as a person, that it's distinctly different than what they do as an athlete, it actually brings out the best athlete in that person. Absolutely. You know what I mean? It's like that switch when it flicks, all of a sudden it's like, there we go. Yeah. There's your best self.
The idea is to kind of get them to reach their potential, right? Yeah. And then some kids, that's qualifying for a provincial final or even just qualifying for provincials, right? Or it's like making a national team or Olympic gold medal or anything in that whole spectrum. Heck, I was real proud of a kid and made sure he knew it because he was the worst kid on the team. This was back in my summer club days, but I taught him how to kick, and it took the entire summer club season to teach this little boy how to kick. But by the end of the season, he could do it, and he was real proud of himself. And he never identified as being one of the best kids because he wasn't, but he was proud of himself, and he saw himself as a successful athlete and swimmer, and then he appreciated that he actually accomplished something, right? And he saw the value in that, not necessarily the value of like the outcome of a race.
Well, it's like we see sometimes, right? You'll see the joy on someone's face. Like we've had national champions, and we see them when they're there, and there's a certain level of joy, but there's also this whole journey down the process that you revisit and think about that got to that outcome. Yeah. But if you look back at a kid when they get their first, sub 4 minute LMR time in the 200 IM, and just that is the ecstatic, pure joy. Like,
absolutely,
that never gets old, right? Like that kid who gets their first LMR time and they're just beaming.
Yeah.
Like that's so good.
I mean, that's what it's about. Or even just like an athlete who accomplished something that on paper doesn't look, it's not even a best time. It's like you have somebody who's overcoming an injury or an illness, and they get back to within 4 seconds of their best time in their best event. And that's a huge accomplishment because they've had to work super hard just to get that. And you make sure that they appreciate that, because it's about context and perspective and making sure that, they're young and they lack a little bit of experience, but making sure that you are trying to instill that with them and valuing that. And that's how you're approaching it with them, to make sure they see that as from the kind of the right point of view, that, they've accomplished something that's been a very impressive thing. And, sometimes it gets lost because, it's not a best time. So what? There's a million things that are impressive and great about a performance or about a race or about an effort that outside of the actual time.
Absolutely. So now I'm curious, right? So you've used your psychology, you've been coaching for a long time. But what was your first coaching job? And then kind of what was the travel through your coaching career? Like just kind of like you've been the head coach of Richmond, if I'm not mistaken, it's 11 or 12 years, something like that.
Ooh, I think it's like +1 on that. I think I'm on 13 now.
13. Oh, the Baker's dozen this year.
I think it's like, it was 06, I think. Was it?
It's 06.
Yeah.
This might be 13 or 14. Okay, so you've been doing that for quite some time.
It's been a while.
And if I'm not mistaken, when you swam for Richmond, you swam for the Racers.
The Racers, yeah. So,
right, and you weren't the Rapids at that point.
Yeah, the two teams in Richmond amalgamated, I think, in '99.
Okay. So you got into coaching because it's so interesting, man, because I think about you got into swimming because your brother couldn't float.
Yep.
You got into coaching because you were tired of pulling people out of 2.5 feet of water at the end of the slide.
Yep.
And you got an opportunity to coach a little bit. And then what was your coaching journey from there? Like, obviously you had some decent mentors because you swam for a couple of years for Randy and Tom, which they're two of the best. So you definitely had some good people to be around. So what was the coaching path for Rob that led him to 06 being head coach at Richmond?
Let's see. I got a great story about my very first sort of kind of winter or year-round sort of coaching position. It was at the end of my second summer of summer club coaching. I was like, you know what? Really don't want to be a lifeguard. And I was going to school. I was up at UBC at that point. So I was like, I don't really want to be a lifeguard. It's like, I wonder if I can get a coaching job somewhere to do while I'm going to school that'll fit in my schedule. And I saw that CDSC had a downtown, the Canadian Dolphin Swim Club had an opening. And so I sent my resume, and then eventually heard back. And then so kind of I got a date, hey, come in, and from Kelly, the head coach at the time, who's still there. And he said, hey, Rob, come on in at, say randomly Tuesday at 3 p.m. I can't remember exactly what it was, but anyway, you get the idea. So all right. So I get myself up, and I'm all, I'm wearing probably my best t-shirt, because I can't imagine I actually dressed up more than that, but I may have actually, if my mom had anything to say about it. Because I'm, going for, a job interview, and I've never really had a proper interview before, to be honest. And so I was like, a little nervous. And so I get there, 10, 15 minutes early. And so I'll go knock on that door, and the little office at the top of the pool. It's basically like half a portable. And Janice Hannon, who was working there at the time, answers the door. I was go, hey Rob, just go wait out in the lobby, and we'll be out there in a minute. I was like, oh, okay, great. Janice and I swam together. We've known each other for years, so this will be great. Janice is in the interview. I immediately relaxed a little bit. And eventually Jan comes out, and she just kind of sits down with a notebook, and we just start chatting and catching up because we hadn't seen each other for a number of months and stuff like that. And then I believe it was, who was it? It was I think can't remember who the assistant was there at the time, but and then the assistant comes out, and then Kelly comes out. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a group thing. All right, no pressure. And so Kelly sits down. I'm like, all right, getting ready for this interview. And there's like 3 other people at the table. And then there was 4 other people because somebody came in from behind me. And it's like another one of the staff members like, well, this is weird. But whatever, I haven't done a lot of interviews, maybe big group interview. And they want to see if I'll fit in with the group and the team. And then Kelly starts a staff meeting. And I'm like, what's happening? And Kelly's just talking about groups. He's talking about planning for the next year. He's talking about all this stuff. This is in the summer because before the season starts. And I'm sitting there as this kid, like sitting, and ready for an interview. And then this is not happening. And then, Kelly, any questions? And I'm like, and I'm just kind of stunned at this point. So I don't say it. But Jan's leaving him, and everybody else kind of leaves. And Jan and I talk for a little bit. And everybody else is kind of looking around. So Jan, I explained the situation. I was like, I thought this was an interview. I've never talked to Kelly about a job yet. I don't even know what the job is. I don't know what it pays. I don't know what my hours are. I don't know what my responsibilities are. And it's like, I have no idea. And then at which point we had a pretty good laugh about the whole thing. And so, yeah, that's how I got, I worked for a development group, and then was basically Kelly's assistant on deck for all his groups at the time. But yeah, that's how I got my first
That's awesome.
Coaching position, sort of in a proper club.
It would have been just too perfect, man, if you said, so does anybody have any questions? It all makes sense. If you just said, so does that mean I got the job?
Yeah, pretty much. It was just like, I was just stunned. It was like, what's happening here? So yeah, I was definitely a little taken aback. And so I'm glad I kept my mouth shut and just let it roll with it. So.
Well, it worked out pretty well for everybody, right?
Yeah. So I spent, I think it was like 2 years. I think I was there for 2 years, maybe a year and a half, 2 years, just kind of being, the lowly coach in the totem pole, not paid a lot, working a ton of hours like we all did.
Yeah,
in the day when we started out. And so I learned a ton, and just kind of shadowed Kelly. And then I would go up to UBC occasionally with the Tom and Randy and stuff like that, and find out what's going on there, and just spending time within the Dolphins organization as a whole back in the day. And then it got to a point where I was kind of finishing up at UBC, and I was like, well, I kind of need a job. And I think I was paid like $450 a month at that point. So you remember those days?
Oh yes, I remember those very well.
So I need a proper job, and at that point, I think Kelly didn't have a proper coaching position available. So I ended up hoping that I get a job. The only thing really available that year was the head coach job out in Winskill. So I ended up getting that position after I applied for it. I think mostly because I was the youngest and cheapest option for all the.
I've gotten some of those jobs too.
Yeah. So I ended up working out well. I learned a lot, made a ton of mistakes, as I think we all do in our early days, in any job, not just coaching. But I learned a lot from the experience. So I spent 2 years there in Tawasin, and I was fortunate in the sense that the Richmond job became available because there was a high level of turnover in the position. I guess Craig McCord was there from when the clubs amalgamated in '99 till 2004, and then in the 2004-2005 season, they hired a coach from in Ontario, from Cobra. I can't remember his name, Mike something.
You got to watch those Ontario guys, man. We're no good.
Yeah, nothing but trouble. Anyway, so it didn't work out. And then Ken, at that point, Ken McKinnon was looking to get back in the country. He had left and was working down in the Bahamas for a while. And so he came in the 05-06 season And so Ken was the head coach then, and then he only lasted a year because the head coaching or the provincial coach position became available, actually became a real thing at that point. And so Ken was there for a year, and then after Ken left, I think they got tired of doing interviews. And I'm not sure who else interviewed for the position, but I think they were just happy that I was a local guy. And is Buddy in help there with the? No, he's good. Okay. It's gonna happen.
Kids at home, right?
Yeah. And then and yeah, so I think they just like they were. There's a little bit of being the local kid. I think worked in my favor. They're like, okay, we know who Rob is. We know he's from Richmond and that sort of thing. And so there's that local connection. I think they were looking for a little bit of stability. And so I think I definitely wasn't qualified. I say that in full honesty. And I always told people this, maybe not my first couple of years, but any board after that incident. I got lucky being given the opportunity because on paper, my resume wasn't very deep and my experience wasn't, I didn't have a lot. And Richmond at that point was a much bigger program. So it was a bigger administrative load in running and organizing a staff that large and athletes. So I just got lucky they had that much turnover and, and here I am.
It's so funny because it makes sense that we click because we have very similar stories in a lot of ways, right? Like, I mean, the lowly jobs, the living off Mr. Noodles. I remember getting a buddy to move in with me into a 1-bedroom condo so I could sleep on the futon couch and he could take the room so I could make rent.
Yeah.
Just those old days. And then it's funny because like you got to watch those guys from Ontario because that was me. I moved from Ontario to take over the Chino job. And I think it was really similar. I was the youngest, cheapest option on the table.
Yeah.
And I think I was the 5th head coach in 6 years or something like that, right?
So like a lot of turnover at that point.
There's a lot of turnover. And I'll never forget the president at the time was such a great guy. And he's like, I'm willing to take a chance on the young guy. And I was like, well, thank you for taking that chance. Absolutely. And it's the same thing. I joke around, like I came in with lots of ideas, but the first couple of years, you really think you know what you're doing, but you're kind of, I don't want to say you're guessing, like educated guessing.
Yeah.
You got a lot of theory. And then once you get through those first few years, then you really start to get your stride, right?
Yeah.
And then you can start to really build the program.
Yeah, there's just like there's a lot of putting, I don't know, for me, and I always tell young coaches to say the first couple of years in Richmond, it's just me putting in my time. It's like I lived at the pool because we were lucky enough to have an office there. And I didn't have a club computer at that point. There was just one computer and I had to learn the program. I had to learn how to really use the meet manager program or team manager program. I had to learn how to do virtually everything involved in the administrative side of our jobs. Coaching is a fun part. That's and concentrating on swimming is the part we love, right? And the administrative part is like the necessary evil, for lack of a better term, right? And so that I had no idea about any of that, budgets and forecasting and payroll and this, that, and just everything that goes along with it, right? Paying pool bills and, and everything. Like I had to learn everything. And so I just spent like hours and hours and hours at the pool trying to figure it out, right? Until I did figure it out. So, but it just took time, just a lot of time.
Well, that's it. And it takes time to get good at it. And I think just to figure out the job, it's like the one thing to do the coaching, but once you're the head coach, you're running a program, there's so many different hats that you wear.
Yes.
Right. And you get there because of the coaching, but then it's basically running the business, right?
Yeah. And that's it. It's the business side of it, right? And that was the biggest learning curve for me. And then, just managing it, learn to manage the staff. It's like, it's not just you coaching a group, which was, okay, I can manage that. That's my comfort zone. It's, okay, now there's 300 kids and there's, a dozen coaches and, it just goes on and on and on. And, coach management, board management, athlete management, parent management, the relationship with the pool, and it goes on and on and on. And just figuring those pieces out. And that's kind of part of the journey. It'd be nice to just focus in on the coaching. Don't get me wrong. But this is not the world that we live in. So
no, it's not. It kind of fascinating. So like it worked out well, man, because you didn't really know for sure that coaching was what you were going to end up doing, but then it's progressed really well. You got to Richmond. The club has continued to grow and build, and you've had so much success along the way between like camps and senior camps, junior camps, and select coaches group and all the stuff that you've done. And you've had so much success at Richmond, and it kind of culminated by the end of last summer where you got to go and be the head coach of the Pan Am Games team, which is really cool, and go down to Peru and do that. And had a really awesome team with you, right? Some really good people, good individuals.
Absolutely.
So like if you look at all of that and the journey you've gone through, like at what point did it hit you in your career? You're like, you know what? This is it. This is what I want to do for my life. Like I want to commit myself to swimming. Like at what point did it go from I need a job
Yeah.
to this is the career path I want to continue to go down. I'm all in.
Yeah. I think it was pretty early, and I've always kind of had this sort of question in my mind, and I've talked to my wife about this. Is like, if I wasn't doing this, what else would I like to do? What would I be passionate about? What would I like to pursue? And the answer is always like, well, I don't know what it is. Like, there's nothing else that kind of gives me this level of satisfaction, challenge, and keeps me hungry to learn. Like I'm always reading, talking. That's a big part of trying to put yourself on teams, and then trying to get athletes to that level and then get selected to go to camp or go to whatever provincial, regional, I know, or national, whatever. There's so much to learn, and the experience is like it changes you because it offers a different perspective and to work with different athletes, and it's fantastic. But I'm always looking at, okay, well, now what? I think it's those of us who are in this profession and doing it long enough, nobody's ever content. Everybody's always looking for, how do I get better? How do I do it differently? You can look back, okay, if I had this athlete now, what would I have done? Or, you know what I mean? And so it's like, I'm always looking at, well, how do I make myself better than do a better job with the athletes I've got? And I don't think there's ever been a point where I've been like, oh, I've got this down. I've got this nailed down. It's like, I think it's simply a matter of, I still have so much to do. And there's still so much to do and to accomplish within this that, I'm definitely just not, content. And I've done, everything I can think of, trying to not only the going to camps and applying for positions and stuff like that to try to expose myself to, get myself out of my little bubble in Richmond or even BC or even Canada. But done the education pieces along the way, just looking for something, trying to make myself better through the NCCP system, which is a great sort of path to go through, and it teaches you things. But my biggest takeaway from doing all those courses was just the ability to interact with other coaches has always been the best teacher, right? Spending time with other people, either other swim coaches or especially other coaches at a similar level from different sports, right? That's what I've gotten a lot out of is that sort of like meeting of the minds with different people and different exposures, and just talking coaching and talking athletics and talking development, and with different people from a different background that come at it from a different angle, that make you think about what you're doing or how you're doing it and how you could do it differently to try to do it better. Yeah. Oh, this person's got this athlete and they got that athlete. So you got to do the best you got, best you can with what you got, right? We're not drawing on people from all over. It's like, here's my catchment. All right, here are the pieces I've given. I got to do the best I can with what I got.
Well, it's funny, man, because like you made me think of three things as you were talking there. The one is, I think back to I think it was September of 2017, where you and I were roommates. We went down with Swim Canada with select coaches, and we did the ASCA conference, and then all the little workshops we were doing as well with Swim Canada. And I think about how much we were able to learn and share and discuss with other coaches. And you think about the Sunday morning when we kind of had a vibe that it was a bit of a setup. Yeah. That none of the Swim Canada staff would arrive, and it'd be like, what are we going to do? And yeah. We ended up having this really great group discussion about swimming. So I think about times like that.
Yeah.
And then you also made me think of, I think it was this past September, October. I can't remember when it was, but I think there was 3 swim coaches. It was you, myself, Ben Keast. And we went to, I think it was put on by, I want to say rowing, but there was diving. There was a couple of different sports, right?
Yeah.
And I think that one was centered around communication. Mm-hmm. I'm not mistaken. And that was really, really fascinating. So we got the opportunity to do that. But then, so that was really cool. So just the different things we pulled from. But then it also made me think how much you and I have spoken, especially at the period of time when you had Nick Decker, who was coming up as one of the top flyers. He made short course worlds. He was a medalist at trials, like really swim well. And then I was working with Durgasov. So we would share a lot. Like I would talk to you about breaststroke and what stuff that James was doing. You were giving me stuff with Nick, because I think a lot of young coaches don't realize how much you learn from having exposure to top athletes.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And it really advances our knowledge. And I know the stuff that I got from you that you were doing with Nick really helped me with Nick Duke, and then helped me with Raven Dahlman and some of these flyers that came along, just little tricks and tips that I picked up from you. And I guess, like, side note, for any coaches that are watching right now, talk to other coaches, share ideas, because you learn a lot. So I know you and I have done that quite a bit. We've been on a few camps together just with our clubs and things like that. So I kind of am curious now with everything that's going on with COVID and being shut down, and we're all at home. I know, like for me, we're doing different stuff with our club and finding content. So, what are some of the things that you're doing with your guys at Richmond to try and keep your coaches and your swimmers engaged, to try and keep the community strong? Home training, like what are some of the things that you're doing with your athletes or trying to do to support the families that are with your club that are struggling right now?
Um, I mean, I think we send out kind of a 2 week sort of email blast to all the members, just kind of a generic thing. Here's what's going on. Here are the latest updates. Just to kind of keep people connected with what we're doing. For the most part, the club is shut down. Like there's nothing. We're not doing dry land or anything organized by the team or charging fees or anything like that. Each group coach for the competitive groups is communicating via email to the parents of those athletes and sending little basic sort of dryland programs or sequences of things they can do, and little like links to like things from Pacific Sport for nutrition and things like that, or flexibility if there's some yoga things like Lululemon, or Jeff Race is putting out some stuff for yoga for swimmers, things out there, and just like things they can add into their routine to kind of give them some direction, and give them like their parents like here's how often you should be doing something, and ideal little blocks of time, just kind of break up their day, because we don't want the kids just becoming couch potatoes and just like they're playing video games constantly or watching TV, or they're binging Netflix, and we want them to come back and have a decent baseline level athletic fitness when they come back. And so that's been good for what I'm doing with the older athletes that I work with. We use an app called Slack to communicate. It's kind of messenger app, and we can send documents and messages. And so we have a group COVID-19 fitness challenge. And so every day, every athlete in the group checks in, and they give a little, either they send a picture or what they've done, if they've kind of done, if they have an Apple Watch or something like that to kind of track their run or their bike, or if they've done a specific routine in the morning or afternoon. If they've done, say, maybe a 25-minute HIIT workout, and maybe they went for a jog, or if they did a yoga session, then they went for a run, or they went for a bike ride, or walk with their family, and they're checking in every day with that sort of thing. And then from a social standpoint, the kids have organized Zoom calls for themselves, so that the kids athletes will organize Zoom meeting sort of calls, and they'll either chat, talk. Sometimes it's just them hanging out, because now they're starting to do homework, so they'll have the Zoom call in the background, and they'll all be doing homework, or they'll all watch the same movie on Netflix, and they'll go, ready, go. And so they'll start watching something, and that sense of connection and community with each other is kind of how we're trying to keep them together, that sort of thing. And so sometimes I'll get emails from parents, or emails or direct messages from athletes. Some of them have actually gone so far as to actually set up little pools, because they miss the water so much, so they have either the space in their backyard to buy a small little above ground pool and set it up with a tether or a little stretch cord. Some of them have pools in their backyard, so they're asking about what they should be doing, and giving them some ideas and stuff like that on how to set them up, sending them some information on links and things like that. But that's kind of really where we're at. As far as the staff, I'm trying to keep them engaged, because the club is supporting them through this, and so the senior staff is still being paid through all of this. So they've been given, we have like a Google Doc full of projects. So the staff is slowly and diligently working through that projects list, and it's things that would have been done eventually, but it's given us the time to kind of work on them as a group. Some of them are group projects, some of them are individual, and we can go in and check on all of them, and allows us to kind of, in this time of uncertainty, so that we're kind of working ahead, so that when and if things loosen up or open up, either with the outdoor pools or the indoor pools, so we'll have the capacity to kind of hit the ground running. So if we're kind of have rough ideas on, okay, if A, then here's our plan. If B, here's our plan. And we won't have that, okay, we got to run and go do the registration package and go and do this and go and do that. It's like, no, it's small tweaks, and we can turn things around pretty quickly. And some things that would have done like summer projects for coaches, and I would probably check on it later in the summer, are done well ahead of time, and we can kind of make a lot more fine-tuning sort of things on them. So that's how I'm kind of keeping everybody engaged. And we still do semi-regular staff meetings just to touch base, and if anything's changed, and still do the usual sort of board meetings to keep the board of directors in the loop on what's going on and how the club's doing.
It's funny. we've kind of done something similar. We've kind of looked at our program. So, well, this is, guys, this is almost the best time to do a major kind of full on gap analysis on our entire program to
Yeah.
see where can we be better, where are the deficiencies? Because we always talk about a lot of things, but the window of time is so small. And now that we have this bigger window, we're really ripping apart, not ripping apart, but like looking at taking everything apart, looking at it all and seeing where we can make adjustments and
Yeah.
changes. So talk about silver linings to all this. This is one of them, right?
Yeah, I found that the value in that as well. Once I got through the first little bit of really focusing on the administrative side of things and the budgeting and making sure the club will stay afloat and the coaches get paid and look at the various programs coming out by the provincial and federal government and accessing those. It's taking time to kind of think about, okay, what is it that we're doing? What do I want to do differently? All right. And there's not a lot of external stress and other things going on. So I can have time to really just think about that and then put finger to keyboard, not pen to paper so much these days, but finger to keyboard and actually think about things and try to develop some different ideas. So that's one of the things that I'm working on in the background is some holistic sort of things on how the club works from the top down, progress towards my group. And so if I'm looking for this, well, then what are the steps along the way to get to that? So working backwards from where I'd like the kids to be when they come into the group that I coach, right? And then putting in some metrics and some guidelines for the various coaches along the way so that we're all on the same page and things are a little bit clearer.
And the other thing that I'm sure you're doing, because I don't think people realize, but as head coaches, we're spending a lot of time like listening to our public health officials, listening to our local politicians, communicating with our pool programmers and facility operators, because we need to have a pretty good idea of when are we getting back in the water? What's the new normal going to look like? I mean, there's going to be all kinds of new training procedures for the facility staff. There's going to be new procedures for user groups. We're going to have to disinfect things. We're going to have different protocols. Like the whole world of swimming, when we get back to it, is not going to look the same at all. Right. So we're doing a lot of that, and I'm sure you are as well. It's like, so when you look at these, I hate to call them forecasting models because that's one of the things I hate to say, but like when we look at what we might be as a swimming community in September, there's a lot of different scenarios that we have to plan for, right?
Yeah, and I would say probably the biggest thing is simply our models of how we've set things up for, say, number of athletes in per lane. That could change drastically. The number of people in the facility at one time could change. Well, how does that change? How does that affect, for lack of a better term, our business model, right? And then it's not like they built a bigger pool and there's going to be less demand for access, unless they're really restricting it to athletes. There's still going to be other things they're going to, other user groups, lessons, the public, so on and so forth. It's like they're still going to have to fit all those pieces in. So more than likely, we're going to look at the same level of access, but a reduced amount of people that are allowed in the building at one time. And so it's going to be a whole new world, I suspect. I mean, I love the way that it was before, but I don't think it's going to be like that anymore. And I think it's simply a matter of being adaptable and flexible in your thinking and how you're approaching it. And a big part of it is not only just not the facilities, but what is the school system going to look like in the fall? Right. And so then how can we make that work for us if it is going to change? Right. And then there's also the issues like, well, okay, if it is different and say the kids are doing half days and then there's some online stuff, are all the kids in your group on the same schedule? Right. And so there's a number of moving pieces and what if sort of things going on. So it's simply a matter of, I think, thinking ahead a little bit, using your imagination so that you're not blindsided by anything. So you've kind of thought things through. Okay, if this, then that, and if this, then that. And, you can kind of roll the punches relatively quickly once we start getting some actual information. And it seems like that's happening with the other provinces. I can think Alberta just rolled something out just today or yesterday. Ontario is rolling things out, and so Saskatchewan's rolled things out. So we're starting to get an idea, and I suspect that we'll get something from BC probably within the next week or so. But I think they're kind of doing the smart thing. They're kind of waiting and seeing what other people have done and how it then affects their infection rate, right? Because we've seen, when people rush back to it, there's huge spikes if they're not doing it properly, if they've done it too early, right? So it's just with an overabundance of caution. There's a full respect for what they're doing because, a week or two out of the water is not going to hurt anybody, or even a month or two. It's swimming, and we want people to be healthy and people to be safe.
Well, it's funny because like even different municipalities within the province are so different. Because right now, the way our club is set up, I'm dealing with North Van Rec, the city of Vancouver, and the city of Burnaby.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, all three are completely different in their protocols right now, and they all have completely different decision-making processes,
Yeah.
and they're in completely different places and what their rollback looks like. So it is the one thing that I always say to people is I caution anyone who looks at what's going on in a different city or a different province or a different country. It's like it's really start looking really very much so in your community, because your community is going to be what you're going to be focused on and dealing with, right?
Yeah. And I know the people in Richmond, they're starting that forecast piece. They're still looking at what other people are doing to try to figure out. They don't even have an idea of what they're doing yet, and rightfully so. They're still figuring it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer because I know you got three little ones that have been pretty supportive to you sitting and taking the time to talk to me. I do a thing with every athlete that I talk to where I always say, like, if you can go back and tell yourself when you were a kid or at a certain age when you were swimming, or if you could talk to a young kid now, what would you say? So I'm going to do it a little different with you. If you can go back and talk to yourself when you were getting into coaching or as a young coach coming up, or just talk to a young coach right now, would you have a piece of advice or guidance for a young coach?
Yes, I would definitely say avoid the temptation to chase the job or chase find someone to be a mentor and to learn from and learn their system. And then that's not to say that that's how you're going to mimic your entire career, but to learn from someone who's been successful, who's been around for a while, and who's willing to teach you. Because there's a difference between somebody hiring you to do a job and somebody who's willing to mentor you and spend extra time with you and to help develop you as a coach. Try to find that person. Try to find that person who's willing to let you into their circle a little bit, because some people are not so much. They don't like sharing, right? They don't like people on the pool deck. They don't like people seeing what they're doing, sharing, and that's their prerogative. But find someone that will teach you and be a good mentor. And that's, again, it's not always the good stuff. It's like here's in the litany of my mistakes, and here's what I would have done differently, and here's why. And then sharing that, and then instilling that value of failure, because I think that's far too often people get wrapped up in success, and then if it does sort of falter, then some of the times the people that have been successful athletes, coaches, they don't know what to do because they don't necessarily know why they were successful. They were just successful, and then all of a sudden that changed, and then their ability to be adaptable or know how to be flexible isn't there, as opposed to the people that maybe have stumbled along the way, have learned, and kind of are better for it and are more prepared for the ups and downs of life and high level competition.
I think that's fantastic advice. And I know that we both came from some pretty good mentors and having the ability to be around some good people. I had fantastic ones. Could barely afford to live, but I learned a lot about the sport of swimming. And I think for me, I kind of add on to that, saying like someone's going to mentor you and teach you, and then also give you the opportunity to make those mistakes and learn from them, right? Because that's the biggest thing. Like, I think I'm successful now because I made so many mistakes.
Cheers.
So, Rob, I really, really appreciate you coming on and just kind of sharing a little bit of your story, your journey, and what you've gone through, what your club's going through now. I just really think it's good for us as a swimming community to share this, because I think we're all going through similar things. And sometimes I know from having the opportunity to talk to a few swimmers and coaches, and I don't know, it just makes me feel a little bit better about what we're dealing with and going through. And it's nice to see a friendly face when we're stuck at home.
Absolutely. It's nice to talk to an adult.
Yeah. I've watched a lot of Wiggles, and
fair enough.
And I know a lot of songs. What's that?
Paw Patrol and lots of princess movies over here.
Yep. You doing dance parties and dress up?
Yeah, there's a lot of dolls, a lot of dress up, a lot of. I gotta say, thank goodness for the Disney Channel. That's it is worth its weight in gold at this point in my life.
Absolutely. Disney Plus has been a big help for us too.
Yeah.
So. Good. All right, man. Well, I really appreciate doing this. I want you to stay safe, keep the family safe, and take care. And I'm looking forward to the time when we can actually do this in person very, very soon.
Absolutely. All right. It's a pleasure.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.